You have 24 hours to demolish that eyesore or we're calling the sheriff. That was Victoria Ashworth, the HOA Queen Bee, screaming at me from the edge of my own property. I was 3 days into building my dream cabin when she stormed onto my land, waving legal papers and clutching a clipboard like a weapon. The scent of pine sap from my fresh lumber was completely drowned out by her choking perfume. Victoria thought she owned this mountain. She was threatening massive fines and acting like I was some intruder in her pristine kingdom. Little did she know, I had a secret that was about to legally obliterate her entire world. I had information that would turn her threats into the most expensive mistake of her life. But before I tell you how one phone call destroyed an entire HOA, drop a comment. What would you do if your neighbors tried to steal your land? And tell me where you're watching from. HOA nightmares unite us all. My name is Marcus Brennan. I'm a 45-year-old electrician who recently inherited 5 acres of Colorado mountain paradise from my eccentric Uncle Silas. After a brutal divorce and months of living in a cramped city apartment, this land felt like salvation. Uncle Silas was the family mystery. He disappeared into these mountains back in 1980 and only showed up at Christmas smelling like wood smoke. Most relatives wrote him off as a crazy hermit, but when his lawyer called, saying I'd inherited his property, I knew Silas had a plan. The land was breathtaking. Hawk cries echoed off granite cliffs, and the gurgle of the creek was the only music I needed. I cashed out my 401k and started building a modest log cabin. Nothing fancy, just a place for my teenage daughter, Emma, to visit. On day 3 of construction, the white BMW X5 rolled in. Victoria Ashworth emerged, heels clicking against the rocky ground with military precision. "Excuse me," she barked, "are you the individual responsible for this unauthorized construction?" "Marcus Brennan," I said, setting down my saw, "and I'm building on my land." She flipped through a leather portfolio with theatrical authority. "This construction violates every covenant in Pine Valley. No permits, no architectural review. Your uncle signed these covenants 6 months ago. You inherited his obligations." "Wait, Uncle Silas died 8 months ago. Dead men don't sign contracts." She handed me a cease and desist order and a bill for $2,500 in penalties. "Daily fines begin at $500, she announced. Then she got personal. "This isn't the type of neighborhood where people in your situation thrive, Mr. Brennan. I'd hate for your daughter to be embarrassed." She'd researched me. She knew about my divorce and my kid. That was the moment this stopped being about rules and started being about war. Victoria didn't wait 48 hours. The next morning, she returned with a lawyer who looked like he'd bought his degree at a grocery store. Douglas Cranky informed me that I now owed $15,000 and that my ownership claims were void. I went straight to the county courthouse. Betty, a clerk who remembered my uncle, helped me dig through the records. What we found made my blood boil. The Pine Valley HOA was formed exactly 6 months, 2 months after Silas passed. The boundaries were drawn in a perfect circle around my property. Every member was either Victoria's relative or worked for her husband's construction company. This wasn't a community. It was an organized crime ring with a clipboard. I hired Sarah Kim, a razor-sharp real estate attorney. "This is legally impossible. You can't bind a dead man to new covenants." But Victoria escalated. She created a community safety Facebook group, posting my photo and calling me a transient criminal. She even posted the HOA's financial records to show they had plenty of money to sue me. That was her second massive mistake. The records showed $847,000 collected in special assessments over just 6 months from only 12 houses. That's $70,000 per family, and there were no amenities, no pool, no paved roads, nothing. The money was just gone. Then came the sabotage. At 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of breaking glass. My lumber pile was smashed, my generator was tipped over, and fuel was soaking into the ground. My truck sat on 4 flat tires. It was psychological warfare. I spent the next day installing a high-def security system. That night, my cameras caught a hooded figure pouring gas near my lumber. It was Tommy Ashworth, Victoria's son. While the sheriff dealt with Tommy, Sarah and I followed the real money trail. We discovered that a massive resort developer had approached the county months earlier. They wanted to build a $50 million luxury resort, but they needed my 5 acres as the centerpiece. Victoria wasn't just a mean neighbor, she was a scout for the developers, earning a massive consulting fee for every property she delivered. The next blow was the cruelest. My ex-wife called screaming. Victoria had posted lies in a safety group claiming I was a registered sex offender. My daughter was in tears, her friends were whispering, and my custody rights were suddenly in jeopardy. Victoria had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. But I was prying up floorboards in Silas's old workshop when my crowbar hit metal. I found a steel lockbox. Inside were corporate seals and legal paperwork that turned the entire world upside down. Uncle Silas hadn't just owned 5 acres. He'd formed a holding company 27 years ago and quietly bought up the defaulted mortgage debt of the entire valley during the 2010 housing crash. I wasn't just a member of Victoria's HOA. Legally, I was her landlord. Every single house in that neighborhood, including Victoria's, was built on land owned by my uncle's holding company. They thought they owned their land, but they were actually tenants on a 99-year lease that Silas had been quietly managing. Victoria had been collecting fees and threatening fines on property that belonged to me. She was 3 months behind on her own ground rent. I could legally evict her in 30 days. I sat in Silas's old chair, the scent of motor oil and old leather around me, holding the power to destroy every life in that valley. I could sell the land to the resort and walk away a multimillionaire. I could make Victoria homeless. I thought about Emma. I thought about the neighbors she'd lied to. I remembered Silas's words, "Don't let them push you around." I chose Plan D. We called an emergency meeting. Victoria stood at the podium, ready to call for my removal. She looked triumphant until I walked in with the Attorney General's investigators and the original 1998 holding company documents. The silence in that room when I revealed that the HOA was fraudulent was deafening. But when I revealed that I owned the ground beneath their feet, Victoria actually fainted. I didn't evict the neighbors. Instead, I exposed the $800,000 Victoria had embezzled. I worked with federal investigators to ensure she and her husband faced charges for fraud, defamation, and bribery. As for the land, I dissolved the HOA and offered every family the chance to buy their land outright at the original 2010 prices. Victoria is gone. The resort deal collapsed, and my cabin is finally finished. I'm sitting on my porch now, watching Emma fish in the creek. The air finally smells like pine again, and not a trace of cheap perfume. Uncle Silas was right. The land has secrets. You just have to be the right person to hear them.